Welcome to your daily dose of theological German. We are continuing our way through this Paul Tillich article about the theology of culture. So, the advance or progress of, and here we won't translate this article, just like yesterday we had abstract nouns. Here this is also an abstract sort of concept. We're not going to say the in English, we'll just leave it off. The progress of scientific empiricism. And here you have your verb entscheidet, which is entscheiden in the infinitive form, and it just kind of blandly means to decide, or really though to determine, to make a determination. In judicial contexts, it might say to rule, right? You make a ruling. And so what's this saying? Well, it's just saying that scientific empiricism, the progress that it makes, is decisive. Or if you wanted to kind of be kind of funny and colloquial and set up the next sentence nicely, you could say something like, the progress of scientific empiricism makes all the decisions. It has decided, since scientific progress is making all the decisions, it has decided, and here you can see why it's probably better to use a translation like determined. It has determined, scientific progress has determined that, das, you actually have two das phrases here, and just like in English with the use of the word that to introduce a phrase, you can use this to create an entire phrase that is the object of a verb where appropriate. So a verb like determine or other verbs would be things like to know or to say, and so you can have whole phrases that then go into whatever it is that's determined or known or said. So it has determined that the Earth is a floating body, not a floating disk. And I want to draw your attention to something here with the terminology. Here you have schwebende and here you have schwimmende. And the German here are obviously two different words, but I translated them as both floating. Well, that's because schwebende is talking about something that floats in the sense of hovering, floating kind of like in space, which of course is how science has now helped us to understand the world. Whereas schwimmende, just like the English cognate swim, is talking about something that's floating on water. And so this is where you're kind of contrasting the ancient worldview with our kind of modern scientific worldview. And so to be really precise, you actually might want to just spell that out because it is sort of implied in the terminology itself. So you could say it has decided that the Earth is a body floating in space, not a disk floating on water. And what else has it decided? It's also decided that the 5 books of Moses are from various or a variety different sources, not derived from Moses. Now you'll notice in both of these das phrases that there is no verb, and so I've had to supply it in both cases. I've just used a to be verb, and you can use a to be verb, or in the case of the second one here, you might want to use the verb to come, which is interestingly very closely related to the being verb in most languages, which is why in English we even have a compound, become. And so you can probably use come or to be, one of those two verbs, to complete these types of clauses which have no verbs in them. You could call this a verbless clause, I suppose, but that's not a characteristic feature of German, but many times for the sake of brevity and succinctness, German authors like Tillich will actually write this way, and so you do have to supply that verb. So let's just go ahead and try to do this up in a nice full sentence from the beginning. The progress of scientific empiricism is determinative. It has determined that the Earth is a body floating in space, not a disk floating on water, and that the 5 books of Moses come from a variety of sources, not derived from Moses.